Welcome, everyone. My name is Sierra Sanchez, webinar producer with CGLR. The webinar will begin at the top of the hour and will be recorded. Connect with the campaign for grade level reading on social media. On Facebook, like the page Campaign for GLR. On Twitter, follow the account at Reading by Third. And on LinkedIn, subscribe to us at Campaign for GLR. Please use the hashtag #LearningTuesdays and tag us to tweet anything you learn from today's webinar, and we'll be sure to retweet. We encourage you to share your questions, reflections, and observations on social media. Okay, once again, welcome to everyone. My name is Sierra Sanchez. I have just a few housekeeping details before we get started. First, we'd love for you to introduce yourself. So please use the chat box at the bottom of the screen to share your name, city, or state, and your organization. Be sure when responding to select both panelists and attendees so that we all know who is here. The webinar is being recorded and live streamed on Facebook. A link to the recording, as well as any resources, slides, and bios will be shared that are shared during the conversation will be sent in a follow-up email to all who registered. And we will be posting a brief on-screen evaluation during closing and highly encourage you to respond. This helps us with our commitment to continuous improvement. Additionally, closed captioning is available to all participants and panelists, and we encourage you to turn on that function as needed. And before we start, I wanted to call your attention to our upcoming webinars that we have. Next week on September 26th, we have an exciting doubleheader. First, a funder-to-funder conversation at 12:30 Eastern Time with a focus on well-being in Flint, Michigan. This conversation will be especially interesting for those of you who joined today's conversation. That same day at 3 p.m., we'll have a conversation on Beyond the Headlines, What Data Tell Us a Year Later. And in October, we are excited to launch off the month with a session on taking action, accelerating equitable learning recovery. And then a Crucible of Practice Salon on October 10th at 12:30. All registration links and information for all of these sessions will be posted in the chat box now, and we hope that you can join us. And joining you now is Bonnie Howard, Senior Consultant with the Campaign for Grade Level Reading. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. We are delighted that you've chosen to spend time with us today. This is actually part 2 of a discussion which was launched during Grade Level Reading Week in July. And in that session, we gained an appreciation for what it means to be 2Gen. We explored 2Gen approaches that help low-income children and families. We heard from national experts to help us think about how to frame this work. And Local United Ways talked about what's working on the ground. So today, our aim is to continue to talk about 2-generation approaches that support children and adults in their lives, both parents and caregivers, by going deeper into how United Ways are supporting high-quality education for children and helping their parents to skill up for better employment and economic security. What we know from science, as well as experience, is that parents are motivated to succeed by their children, and children are inspired to do well by their parents. Parents' education is strongly correlated to the educational success of their children, and economic security has a profound effect on outcomes for children. So with that, I'm going to go to the next slide and just try to introduce you to the folks who are doing this work, who are going to really be leading us in this conversation today. So first is Shannon Jenkins. She guides the strategic development and execution of United Way of Central Indiana's issue-based impact strategy, focusing on investments and outcomes that lead to educational success, economic mobility, and safe and affordable housing for Central Indiana residents. Through community investment, grounded in equity, thought partnership, and collaboration, Shannon and her team leverage the 2Gen approach to support, implement, and invest their initiatives that serve Central Indiana households and families who are living in or near poverty. Thanks, Shannon. And next we have Lakeisha Bragg. Lakeisha has over 14 years of experience in nonprofit organizations and workforce development. and she now leads a multi-sector partnership into phase 2 of the 2-generational family-centered approach that's geared towards strengthening low to moderate income families across San Antonio. Previously, Lakeisha worked for Goodwill Industries. During that time, she was the program manager and lead case coach for the initiative, managing the program that helped families navigate towards resiliency and economic stability. In another role as a program manager, Lakeisha served more than 1,000 residents and guided more than 400 through career development programs. In her servant leader role, she is an advocate for uplifting parental voice and advancing equity in her work. Iola Fortuny is the interim senior vice president of the impact team at United Way Worldwide. She provides oversight, strategic guidance, and support to team members managing key initiatives in education, economic mobility, and health. She leads United Way's efforts to support local United Ways to integrate equity into their impact work by developing frameworks, strategies, peer learning, training opportunities, and developing resources and tools. She also leads United Way's efforts to collect and aggregate data from local United Ways to demonstrate collective impact across communities via the Global Results Framework. And she's going to talk to you a little bit about that shortly. And finally, rounding out our team is Marjorie Sims. She's the managing director at Aspen Institute. Marjorie has more than 20 years of experience in advancing the status of women and families in local, state, national, as well as international levels. She's been expanding women's roles in leadership positions, also in philanthropy. Before joining Ascend in 2018, she served as program officer at the W.K. Kellogg Foundation with a specific focus on family economic security programs and managed a $65 million grant portfolio. Prior to joining Kellogg, Marjorie held the positions of Chief Operating Officer, Interim President, and Vice President of Programs and Operations at the Washington Area Women's Foundation, where she helped launch Stepping Stones, a $5 million multi-year regional initiative to increase the income and assets of women-headed families. In addition, Marjorie served as the executive director of the California Women's Law Center and as a policy analyst with the International Center for Research on Women. She's the co-founder of Women's Policy, Inc., an organization that emerged from the Congressional Caucus for Women's Issues to provide unbiased analysis and educational briefings about federal legislation affecting women and families. And so with that introduction to the folks who are going to be leading you for the day, I'm going to turn it over to Iola to get us started. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bonnie, and welcome everyone to my United Way colleagues and the many community partners that are joining us for part 2 today. I am so pleased to be joining you to help set the context for today's conversation about 2-gen strategies to holistically address the needs of families to support their overall well-being, and specifically highlighting the work of local United Ways. I'll start off by sharing a little bit about our overall network. As you can see on the slide, United Way has a global impact agenda. And one of the things that sets us apart is that we work across the key issue areas that have the greatest impact on people's everyday lives. The ability to access a quality education, to have access to healthcare services and live in environments that enable healthy living, and the ability to obtain jobs that pay living wages and make it possible to support oneself and a family. Our network consists of over 1,000 United Ways, a global network across 36 countries that works across sectors to build deep relationships with the nonprofit community, with businesses, with local and state government. Many United Ways lead efforts to convene cross-sector to advance work that leads to equitable community change. And this includes 2-gen approaches, but also efforts that many United Ways lead, like community schools, integrated service delivery, and Strive or Ready by 21 efforts. It is the knowledge of those issues on the ground that impact individuals and families, and knowing that those issues are fundamentally interconnected that fuels our work across sectors to drive the lasting change and change the trajectory for individuals and their families. So we work across and within specific issues that impact everyday lives, and we track our reach and our impact via the global results framework. So it's not only how we work, but what are we delivering? What's the change, the meaningful change that we are making in people's everyday lives? If we go to the next slide, I want to share with you, by way of context setting, some recent data from the 2023 United Way Global Impact Practices Survey, which provides the data points to show how United Ways are advancing work in these key impact areas across childhood and youth success, economic mobility, health, and environmental sustainability and disaster response, which is a newer area of work that we're capturing. The data that you see here is based on about a third of our network responding, 350 United Ways that responded to this year's survey, and shows the prevalence of our work in each of these areas. As you can see, our work in childhood and youth success and economic mobility are really the cornerstones. They're the three most common areas of our work. And within these areas, United Ways are implementing specific strategies and approaches. For today's conversation, I just wanted to drill in a little bit on childhood success and economic mobility. So if we go to the next slide, you see that close to 3/4 of our network are working in childhood success and a similar amount in youth success. In childhood success, our efforts are focused on ensuring that children get off to a good start, 0 to 8. And that specifically often translates into leading or investing in efforts that ensure access to high quality early childhood programs, providing literacy supports, including access to books. So Dolly Parton is a very common program implemented in the network, and literacy-focused initiatives, including summer learning programs, as well as engaging families as their child's first teacher. So that's some of the strategies that are prevalent in the network when we drill deeper into childhood success. We go to the next slide. In economic mobility, our strategies are focused on ensuring that families have access to the financial services that enable stability, things like free tax preparation, getting access to bank accounts, either checking or savings, accessing affordable lines of credit. It also includes helping people get access to training, workforce development programs, and employment services to support their gainful employment and potential wage growth. In all of these efforts, United Ways are convening partners, engaging community members, making strategic investments, aligning and coordinating efforts across partners, gathering data to understand areas of progress and challenge, and building community awareness of need. The breadth and depth of the issues we work on and the manner in which United Ways do the work makes them strong partners to lead and support two-generation efforts. And you will hear from your colleagues today from San Antonio and from Indianapolis, who will provide two really strong examples of how United Ways are engaging in this efforts. And so again, it's my pleasure to join you today. I'm looking forward to the conversation. And with that, happy to turn it over to Marjorie.
Thank you so much, Iola, and deeply appreciate this opportunity to support these learnings and resources with United Way Worldwide, as well as the campaign for grade level reading. It's been really delightful to identify and support the work that United Ways are doing across the country. So I'm going to share with you just at a high level ascend, our work and what two-generation approaches, look like, how we talk about them at the national level, and how that work has unfolded across the country. And this, as Bonnie shared, is the second webinar that we're doing. I provided a little bit more in depth in the first webinar. So if you're interested in learning a little bit more, please do access that recording from the first webinar. So in the next slide, just a little bit about Ascend at the Aspen Institute. We are a policy program of the Aspen Institute. We're founded by Ann Mosley, who's our executive director, and she's also a vice president at the Institute. And the purpose of Ann, coming to the Institute really was to change the national conversation about how you support families. And really doing work that is intentional to support families holistically and focused on a two-generation approach. What we believe is our important North Star is economic mobility for all families. So although two-generation approaches is the content and focus of our work, our ultimate goal is economic mobility for all families. And we are a convener at the national, local, regional level on how you do this work really well. We invest in leaders. We have a national fellowship program called the Aspen Ascend Fellows. It is an 18-month-long values-based leadership program, and we support leaders who happen to be at an inflection point in their career, who are engaged at high levels within communities, and they have resources to really change the trajectory for families. So our fellowship program is really vibrant, and next month we'll actually be announcing another cohort of Ascend Fellows, and that will add another 20 to our current 120 fellows. And then we also, work across the country with nonprofit organizations and associations to look at how two-generation approaches unfold, both within organizations as well as within state systems and policies at all levels of government. And then we really, again, want to leverage this effort that the Aspen Institute does, that's at the heart of, our founding, of convening, bringing people together to talk about critical societal issues and making certain that we all have information, resources, and inspired to move towards a just and equitable society. So that's a little bit about, Ascend and the Aspen Institute. And the next slide, I'm just going to share with you, our core values. We believe fully that, looking at all of these efforts from an abundant mindset is really important. We believe that, families and communities and policymakers, everyone has assets to bring to conversations. We honor lived experience. Equity is at the center of all that we do. And then we believe very fully that working collaboratively and collectively, we can go much further than going alone. So those are our values. And then in the next slide, thank you for managing the slides, our theory of policy and systems change. And this is really important because this is how we make certain that families are centered in all of this work. Their recommendations, their experiences are grounding all of our work, whether it be in an organization or in a system or as a policymaker. So starting with the voices and recommendations of parents or families themselves is very important to, change in systems and structures. Relying on data and evidence is critical, and then best and next practice. But we know that all of this work requires a lot of leadership and culture change and political will. So this is, the theory of change that we share with, people within our network and nonprofit organizations to consider as a way of deepening all of this work around two-generation approaches. And in the next slide, a little bit about two-generation approaches. And this approach truly is, again, about moving and advancing intergenerational family prosperity and well-being. And the next slide I'll share with you kind of some of how we have worked to frame and talk about two-generation approaches, because we want everyone that is taking two-generation approaches know that the ultimate goal, again, is family well-being. And the way in which you do that is by intentionally and simultaneously working with children and the adults in their lives at the same time. We shared this graphic almost in every single presentation because it's a reflection of where we're headed, but often, how most organizations or programs or policies are currently structured. And that is they're either child focused on one end or adult focused on the other end. And this effort truly is to bring all of our resources together so families are supported, as a unit for intergenerational mobility and prosperity. And in the next slide, what we know is that this concept of two-generation approaches is inherent in Indigenous communities here and around the globe. Meaning that, if there's a family in a community that has, a need or a crisis, you support the entire family. No one goes to that family and simply says, I'll support your children or I'll support your teenagers or the adults. You want to help that entire family. So this concept is inherent in Indigenous communities in the United States and around the globe, but it's unfolded across decades, through policy at the federal level, as well as in communities. And I'll point you to in the part of the War on Poverty, the Head Start program is often recognized as the first federally funded two-generation program because it's about providing early care and learning and supports to young children, but also helping those parents to, understand their career aspirations and job training and job supports that allow them to provide for their families. The term two-generation was coined in the late 1980s by the Foundation for Child Development, where they saw very intentional efforts among early childhood programs to bring together supports for the parents. And what our learning is around two-generation in this iteration is based on what was learned in those early years of two-generation approaches. And the next slide will share with you that we recognize that across the country, two-generation, the terminology is different, but there's one approach. Again, it's supporting both children and their parents simultaneously. And you'll hear the two United Ways talk about today how they use the approach and then have named it for their community. So, across the country, it can be called whole family approaches or multi-gen. And Hawaii, it's called a Hananui to reflect, culture and community engagement. It's called intergenerational approaches. Sometimes it's just simply called two-gen. But again, it's the approach around supporting the family holistically. And the next slide, some of the specific elements around a two-generation approach. We know that there are core components. All families need, complements of supports and services and opportunities. And what you see here are those core components. And what we recognized in two-generation approaches is that social capital happens to be the secret sauce of taking a two-generation approach. And that simply means in allowing families to understand and bridge networks and opportunities so that they can navigate formal and informal systems for themselves. How do you as practitioners or policymakers knit families together so that they're building community and have those social capital tools and skills to really thrive in their communities? So those are the core components of a two-generation approach. And in the next slide, we'll just share with you that there's a lot of research that grounds two-generation approaches. And the one that I'll just pull out for you, and we're happy to share, all of these resources with you, but one that we point to often is the work that's done by Dr. James Heckman, who's a Nobel laureate, that over almost 3 decades has demonstrated that when you provide, quality early care and learning to young children and their parents, society will have a 13% return on investment. But even more recent research is indicating that when you have predictable monthly unconditional cash aid to low income or families with low income, you can increase that infant brain activity. So there's a wealth of research that, documents the importance of two-generation approaches, and all of this work now at the national and state level and community level is to provide those resources about how we change systems to do this work better. And in the next slide, there are core principles for taking a two-generation approach. You look at these 5 principles, all of them are solid for, any program or policy. The one that really distinguishes a two-generation approach from others is the very first one: measuring and accounting for outcomes for both children and the adults in their lives at the same time. This is a very high bar for any one organization to achieve, and you'll hear from the United Ways today about how they're doing that, how they're capturing, information from the whole family, both children and the parents simultaneously, but it has to be intentional and it has to be directed, by the parents. So rest all of your work in guiding principles and you'll have just stronger outcomes overall. And in the next slide, want to share with you that, two-generation approaches unfold along a continuum, meaning that first and foremost, you have to learn about what the approach is. It's a new way of thinking about designing programs and policies to serve families. In the earlier graphic, I shared with you that two-generation approaches are about the whole family, but most programs and most policies across the country center on one individual member of the family. This work is about a new mindset. And then the next part of the continuum would be a two-generation strategy. How are you as an entity, an organization, or a system thinking about aligning and coordinating services with other organizations or other systems that you're connected to support families holistically? But at the highest level, furthest along the continuum, is a two-generation organization, meaning that one organization is providing services and supports to both children and the adults simultaneously, and they're tracking outcomes for the entire family. So just know that, we've learned a lot over the last decade on how to do two-generation approaches really well. And this continuum allows for organizations and policymakers to think about where they are along that continuum. And the next slide simply is a reflection of how two-generation approaches occur across a community. I won't go through all of these, but just know that there are ways in which we've thought about two-generation approaches across a community, whether or not it be a region or a state. But it does have to start with a lot of intentionality. And in the next slide, thank you again for managing the slides. Just know that Ascend is a resource to all of you. We've learned a lot, as I shared earlier, about those earlier iterations of two-generation approaches and have documented that in a number of our publications. And just know that, Ascend, is a resource, as well as your colleague United Ways and other nonprofit organizations that are doing this work. And the next couple of slides are going to be about challenges and opportunities. And I wanted to illuminate some of these for you so that you're aware that this work has to be really intentional. You have to be deliberative. And the two United Ways, on the webinar today can share some of the challenges that they've experienced, but we also want to share some of the solutions and how do you, make certain that your partners have a clear understanding about their role in collaboration and what makes collaboration really strong. How do you recruit, parents? How do you support your staff? And then also, how do you identify those policy barriers? Again, we've learned a lot. We've documented, some of these learnings in our publications, and happy to share all of this work with you. And quickly, I'm running out a little bit of time. I'm going to make certain we get to our United Ways in the next couple of slides. It is sharing with you some of the information about two-generation approaches and how they've unfolded across the country. So our Ascend network is now over 500 organizations, close to 540. And these are all, organizations that are interested in taking two-generation approaches. And the next slide, you can see a little bit about our reach across the country. Collectively with Ascend and our network and our fellows, we're reaching over 12 million families every single year, and those leaders are stewarding about $34 billion in public resources. We're in all 50 states, the District of Columbia, and recently added network partners in Ireland, Guatemala, and Rwanda. So again, the concept is inherent in Indigenous communities. We've learned a lot, and we want to share this information if you're interested in being on this journey. And in the next couple of slides, we're coming to the end. I wanted to showcase for you that we do have a number of United Ways in our network, and happy to connect you with those that are also on this learning journey. And in the next slide, which I think might be my last slide, it is this quote from one of our parent advisors. And this resonates so deeply with Ascend and with our network is, don't just meet us where we are, meet us where we dream. You've heard that saying, meet people where they are. She actually iterated on this and said, no, we have a lot of dreams and meet us there. So that is a tribute to Janine McMahon, who's been a parent advisor with Ascend for a number of years. And with that, I'm now going to turn it over to Lakeisha to share with us the work that she's doing in San Antonio. And the name of their work is Dual Generation Initiative. And so, Lakeisha, really looking forward to your comments, and thank you for being an amazing network partner to Ascend. Thank you all.
Thank you, Marjorie. Good afternoon, everyone. As Marjorie stated, my name is Lakeisha Bragg, and I am the Systems Director for our Dual Generation Initiative here at United Way of San Antonio in Bexar County. If you can go to the next slide, please. I wanted to begin by setting a little context about our United Way of San Antonio to show how our Dual Generation Initiative helps tell a broader story of what people in our city and county are experiencing. Our mission here at United Way is to unite the community to identify and solve our most critical issues. And we do that by focusing on 4 impact areas. Through our Ready Children, making sure that we're preparing young children for life. Through our Successful Students, by helping students succeed. Through our Strong Individuals and Families, by fostering self-sufficiency for individuals and families. And then also through our Safety Net, by supporting people in crisis. Our Dual Generation Initiative crosses all 4 of these impact areas around United Way, but we're heavily aligned with our Strong Individuals and Families. Next slide, please. I want to start by saying that we really have to give credit to the Annie E. Casey Foundation and also Ascend at the Aspen Institute for the start of our Dual Generation Initiative here in San Antonio. And just to give a little context, in 2012, the Annie E. Casey Foundation launched its family-centered community change to support local partnerships. In our case, they identified United Way of San Antonio's work with our Eastside Promise neighborhood as an opportunity to implement and create a 2-generational approach to support our highly poverty neighborhood on the east side of San Antonio, which speaks as to why our initiative is a place-based, family-centered, 2-generational collaborative model. I would say that our initiative approaches to strengthen families by giving both the adult and the children the ability to succeed together. And how do we do that? By providing the adult with the career training for advancement, building on financial stability, social capital, and then also providing high quality early childhood interventions, after school supports for children 0 to 10, with households that are at 200% the federal poverty level or below. So you can just imagine the multi-generational poverty that is experienced across our initiative. As of 2021, we were able to expand our services due to a gift from the Mackenzie Scott to our local United Way. With the investments with our United Way, we were able to expand to not only serve the east side of San Antonio, but we expanded to the west side of San Antonio as well. We use a collective impact model, and what that means is through our partnership, we tackle the challenges that families face together. So with our partners, we have mutual reinforcement activities, mutual accountability. We all share one common agenda. And I think what really intrigues our initiative is the fact that we share a shared data system. So all of our partners that are within or partner within our initiative, we share one system. So therefore, we're able to see exactly what's going on with the families that we're serving within our initiative, how many partners are touching and providing services for both the adult and the child in that household. And then also when we were building our initiative, we used the results-based accountability framework. And this framework is to measure our contribution on both a program and a community level. So RBA provides a template of how to create a data-driven decision-making process using principles and concepts to measure the well-being of a whole community and the participants that participate in a program. So RBA really gets us to how much are we doing, how are we doing it, how well are we doing it, and if anyone is better off. Next slide, please. So as Marjorie stated about the 6 components of the Ascend, we did use that to frame our initiative. What you see here, and we can go ahead and go to the next slide because it breaks it down a little further. We provide our services from both a service level and also a systems level. So on the left, you're looking at the service level, and you see those circles within this frame. What that is the middle circle is the whole family. We make sure that we keep the family at the center of our work, and then we build all the supports around the family. So you have the adult component, which is the left circle that's built around workforce development, whether that is participating in education program, career exploration, any high school programs, GED, post-secondary education, all that falls in that circle. On the right circle of that middle circle is the child component. So that's after school programming, that's family engagement for the children, that's anything child related to advance the development of the child in the household. In the top circle is the family well-being. So that's the basic needs supports that we provide across our initiative, any family engagement supports, assisting families with completing like any applications, whether it's FAFSA for college, whether it's any type of assistance that they may need, all that falls in that bucket. And to the right is our systems level. So this is how we function, our initiative as a whole. So we have funded partners, and then we also have partners that we consider our systems level. So those are partners that are not directly funded by our initiative, but they also contribute to the process of us assisting us with making decisions. In 2021, we also developed a parent advisory committee within our initiative to also sit at these decision-making tables to help guide us and help us make decisions as well. And that has since expanded, and now we are implementing more parent advisory committees across all of our United Way programs locally. Next slide, please. This is pretty much a simplified version of a journey within our initiative. So this is what a family does. When a family enters our initiative, they meet with a with a coach. All of our parents and families that participate in our initiative, they are assigned a family coach. This family coach assists them with goal setting processes and meets with them on a monthly basis to make sure they're on track, make sure any basic needs are met, enrolling the children into any high quality care. All that happens throughout the family journeys. One thing we have been really good about is being able to tell the story of what happens from a family, with a family from beginning to the end of our initiative. I will say pre-COVID, on average, a family would stay in our initiative anywhere from 22 to 24 months. We had a completion rate of 86% of families, but we did notice that after COVID, families tended to need a little more time. So it's starting to take them on average, maybe 3.5 years to navigate through the program. Currently, we're serving 300 families, and approximately 220 of those adults are enrolled in a education and training program, and we're assisting close to 250 children as well. So when you're talking about our dual generation initiative, just know every participant or adult that is participating in our initiative, they are in some form of workforce or education and training program, and their child is receiving some type of quality care, whether that is child care, whether that is after school supports, whether that is family engagement activities where we're constantly bringing the adult and the child together. We tend to try to do family engagement events on a monthly basis where we're providing some type of activities where the adults and children can just come together and just enjoy each other. We do SeaWorld trips and things. That's just an example of some of the things that we do. Next slide, please. So people are curious as to how United Way shows up or how we show up across our partnership within our initiative. I would say we show up as a funder, we show up as a backbone support, and then also as a partner. So I will say that we within our initiative, we wear all three hats. It depends on like the moment or whatever it is that we need to focus on. But one thing I will say is we're real big on being a partner more than just a funder. So we work with our partners to make sure that we stay in line with adhering to our common agenda and making sure that we're providing the supports that families need. We know that families are the best teachers, and families know exactly what it is that they want to receive from programs. So parent voice is a big deal, and it is a big issue within our initiative, and also helps guide us when we're making our decisions across our initiative. And I know I didn't have that much time, but you can go to the last slide. So what you see on the right actually is part of our parent advisory committee. These are some of our committee members, and just that will be all. And then I'm open for questions, and then I will also be able to share a slide in the deck that shows more about the impact that we make, and then also some of the measures that we track. So we're tracking how many families are enrolled in our initiative, how many parents are in adult education and training program, how many children are we serving, what supports are they receiving, how many adults are getting a job, how many adults retain that job, and then how many families become financially stable after working with the initiative. And I will hand it back over. Thank you.
Hi, I believe Shannon's going next. Thank you, Shannon.
Marjorie, you're on mute, so I'm going to hand it over to Shannon, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Can you all hear me okay? Because I could see Marjorie speaking, but I also could not hear Marjorie.
I
Okay,
think
great.
I was
Thank
on
you.
mute.
Oh. Are we good? Thumbs up? Good to go? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Oh gosh. Well, this is an honor to be here with all of you this afternoon and to follow you, Lakeisha, for sure. So I love being in spaces like this. And again, it's an honor to be here with all of you this afternoon. My name is Shannon Jenkins, and I am the Impact Senior Director at United Way of Central Indiana. United Way of Central Indiana, we represent the Central Indiana region of Indiana, which is also known as the Indianapolis area. We are 105 years old, just recently celebrating our 100th birthday in 2018. And essentially, we seek to remove barriers that get in the way of economic prosperity for Central Indiana residents and families. And our North Star is to reduce intergenerational poverty by creating intergenerational opportunity for our residents and families. You'll see here our mission and our vision statement, which for those of you who are representing United Ways, this probably looks pretty similar to yours. But I would say, these statements, they drive our why. As all of you know, each community is different based on the needs of the residents and the needs of the specific communities. And so for us in Central Indiana, I'll share a little bit with you about how we compare in terms of ALICE and poverty data on the next slide. So our local United Way is part of the ALICE project, which is out of the United Way of Northern New Jersey. And this is the ALICE data that informs our impact work and the supporting strategies. So as you'll see here, the nationwide average of families living in poverty or ALICE is 41%. And 39% in Indiana, and then 36% in Central Indiana. However, 36% is skewed when we really drill down to the county and the zip code level within our service area. We are able to then better understand and see the state of poverty in ALICE, which I'll show you more here in a moment. But essentially our Central Indiana community has a tremendous range from wealth to poverty, similar to many of the communities that you all represent today. Next slide, please. So within our service area alone, nearly 250,000 people are living in or near poverty. This map here shows the combined ALICE and poverty range by zip code across Central Indiana, and each county within this service area, within our service area, has at least one zip code with an ALICE and poverty percentage higher than the Central Indiana average. When we break it down even further, we can begin to see the disparities in race and ethnicity of households and families, which then deeply informs our initiatives and our investments, which I'll get into here in a few moments. Across our service area, we partner with nearly 400 service provider partners. That ranges from 100 accredited partners, or partners who have gone through United Way's certification, as well as grassroots and grass tops community-based organizations and school partners. Collectively, we all work together to reduce the number of households and families who are living in or near poverty around 4 different issue areas that we and our stakeholders combined have identified as the most pressing issues here in Central Indiana. Next slide, please. So as an organization, we are focused on these 4 issue areas. So speaking back to Iola's point of every United Way identifies what the issues are in their local community. And for us here in Central Indiana, we've identified these 4 as the most pressing issues that we are committed to tackling as part of a new strategic plan that we rolled out actually earlier this summer. All of this work, though, is grounded in the concept of reducing intergenerational poverty. So the 2-generation approach is the foundation of our work, as we know that when we reduce intergenerational poverty, we are creating intergenerational opportunity and economic prosperity for households and families. I'll focus most of my comments today around our early care and learning work, given the topic area of today's webinar, but also I'm more than happy to answer more questions around the other 3 issue areas as well. So next slide, please. So for each of those issue areas that I lifted up that we're focusing on, we apply what we call an impact toolkit for us at United Way. And that's what you'll see here on the right. We apply this toolkit lens in our decision making, which informs our investments, our programming, and more. It keeps us grounded from a value proposition standpoint, but also ensures that we remain well positioned to drive and support equitable outcomes for each of the issue areas as we've defined. So like many of you, we are most known for our work in grant making and community investment, which is at the top of our toolkit. But that said, we also rely heavily on the other 5 functions of our toolkit to create impact. That means for us that in some cases, we are pulling heavily on our advocacy arm. So for example, we facilitate a statewide coalition called Early Education Works to ensure that children and families have access to high quality, affordable early childhood education. We also, though, implement programs when we find that United Way of Central Indiana is the best position to lead or fill a gap. So for example, we have just launched our 17th year of Read Up programming, where we are partnering community and corporate volunteers with 3rd grade students to support our local grade level reading efforts. So based on the strategy or the issue area that we are tackling, there really are various stakeholders in these spaces. And then what and how we show up at the table really varies. So for example, with basic needs, the functions of our toolkit apply differently compared to safe and affordable housing, if you will. So all that being said, the foundation of this work sits on the foundation of 2-generation work, and all of our issue areas and solutions we've applied and will continue to apply the 2-generation approach in our investments. So that's a quick kind of 5-minute overview of who we are at United Way. I can't believe I did that in 5 minutes. Marjorie, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. And you did an amazing job, Shannon. That was a lot of territory to cover. And we're going to have a couple of, conversation questions amongst us. But first, I want to just clarify a couple of things and that were already brought up in the Q&A. And Lakeisha, this question really is for you. And that is, do parents need to have a child to be able to participate or assist in the classes or programs?
So to answer that question, we believe in no wrongdoer. So any family that comes and approaches our initiative for services, if they do not qualify for a dual generation, we still can put them through classes. However, this is a 2-generational approach. So in order for families to be part of our initiative, we have to be providing services for their child as well. But no, anyone can take advantage of some of the training programs that are available. But in order to receive the wraparound supports as far as subsidized childcare, any family engagement events, or any basic needs supports, they would need to be enrolled in our initiative, and they would need to have a child that we're providing services for.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And then this other question is a clarification question for you. And that is, does United Way in the city of Philadelphia, do they participate in dual generation family journey program?
I'm in San Antonio, so I'm really not sure.
Yeah.
But I will say that the dual generation journey, we created that within our United Way, but I'm sure other people may model exactly how to serve families. But that journey is in place and used to show how families are navigating through our initiative and exactly what supports they are receiving throughout the process.
Wonderful. Thank you. And we can get into a little bit more of a conversation about, how you've developed this and how you work with other peer United Ways in a second. But this is a clarification question for you, Shannon, before we go into a deeper Q&A, and that is, can you please expand on what is and how you use your impact toolkit?
Yeah. So I will say we as an organization wrestled with how we show up in spaces. Is it a funder? Is it a program implementer? Is it serving in the advocacy space, or is it all of the above? Around different issues that are important to us as a United Way, but also most importantly as a community partner. And so the toolkit for us really serves as kind of, I would say, almost an accountability measure in how we are thinking about our work. If we identify a solution to a problem within early care and learning that fits outside of our impact toolkit, more than likely that means that we are not best positioned to lead on or partner in that work. And so the impact toolkit it's an internal tool that we use to talk about our work, to engage our board so that they understand who we are. Like many of you as United Ways, you are likely known as primary funders in your community. And when we talk about fundraising, which we may get to this conversation here shortly, we all know that for those of you that are in the United Way network, that we are so much more than just fundraisers. And so when we can talk about our work as advocates or conveners or connectors or thought partners and bringing people together and building capacity in addition to the grant making and the community investment, it really elevates the power of United Ways. And for us, the toolkit that we've established, it serves as kind of the foundation of where we feel that we play a role and help potentially fill a gap for the Central Indiana community. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that was really helpful, Shannon, and it actually gets into the first question that I wanted to pose to both you and Lakeisha, and that is, you meet one United Way, you've met one United Way, right? How do you work with, or what advice, guidance would you give to other United Ways beyond what you just shared, Shannon? How to start, thinking holistically about supports and services for families. And so, Shannon, if there's anything you'd like to, kind of expound upon, and then we'll go to Lakeisha with the same question. So thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Sierra, it would be great if you wouldn't mind sharing the United Way 2-Gen journey slide while I get us started here. So I'll start out by saying for us, it has been an evolution of learning. And we've been in this space for quite some time, as you'll see here on the slide, and we are still learning, and we are absolutely relying on our local partners, but other United Way partners, thought leaders such as Ascend the Aspen Institute, and the United Way worldwide team as well in this. So I'll start out by saying that we really started in this work in 2012 as a partner to the Seymour Family Stability Institute. I believe you are represented here on this call, I believe. And so for us, that started out as really a smaller targeted initiative with a handful of partners where we were being really intentional. So I'm building on what you said, Marjorie, really intentional on what the Seymour funding would allow us to do. And in this case, it was to increase family stability with a housing approach. And so we started there. And then in 2015, we became the lead funder of the Annie EKC Centers for Working Families model and have continued serving in that lead funder role. And from there, really started building. And in 2016, we were awarded a federal grant out of the Obama administration, the Social Innovation Fund, which launched our 3-year Great Families 2020 initiative, where we paired our Centers for Working Families approach. We connected those partners with early childhood providers in 5 place-based communities throughout Central Indiana to build. And so then in 2019, we rolled out a new, what we called family opportunity strategy. So where we took the learnings from Great Families 2020 and began adding in more pieces, bringing in more partners, thinking about the work more holistically to now where we are today, just this past summer, we announced a new strategic plan. And the new strategic plan is the two-generation approach is the foundation of that work. And so while we have 4 issue areas that we focus on, the foundation of those 4 issue areas are grounded in what does it mean to move a family towards economic prosperity and economic mobility through a safe and affordable housing lens model, through a basic needs approach, or through an early care and learning approach. So I will say for us, it's been a matter of an evolution, if you will, of refining, scaling, and then of course sustaining. We have leaned on the thought partnership of other United Ways over the years. We have made ourselves available to sit at tables with other United Ways and other service providers who are in this work. We have brought partners along with us to ensure that those who are on the ground, if you will, who are implementing the work or elevating emerging best practices so that we can learn from and we can elevate those. And I would say last but not least, Marjorie, like the Ascend network and the support and resources from Ascend at the Aspen Institute have really been and have served as our North Star as we refine, as we scale, as we sustain. And so, if I have one tip to say, it doesn't happen overnight. Actually, I guess I have 2 tips. It doesn't happen overnight. And it's a process, it's an evolution, it's a journey. And so, my tip would be to start small and to build and grow from there.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shannon, for sharing the journey and the intentionality, and then also, the strategies that you all have put in place around funding too. I think that, again, my comment about the intentionality is really important. Like you said, it won't happen overnight, but I'd love, Lakeisha, for you to share a little bit more about the journey that you all have been on, what you've learned, and how you partner with others.
So I would say I second everything that Shannon just said, and without repeating, I think part of our lessons learned would also be the advice that I'm getting ready to give to anyone in regards to 2-generation approaches. I think one of the big things, and one of the things that we learned, being that we've been part of this process since 2013, and just in 2021, started a parent advisory committee. I would say the first advice that I would give is to consult with families through having community-based conversations to help co-design like any programs or any practice solutions to really reflect the realities of children and their parents and caregivers. So that's having conversations around education programs, any transportation supports, childcare, any types of programming that you're interested in bringing into the community. Have the voice of the community at the table with you, helping you guide and make those particular decisions. Another thing I would say is develop a recruitment and retention strategies that pretty much that are informed by the experiences that families are sharing with you, that will more likely be participating in the 2-generational approach. Because a lot of times you would bring different programs to the community, and then you may wonder why families are not utilizing those activities, and it could be that's not what they want. So really, uplifting that parent voice and letting those parents and that community guide you. Another thing I would say is the braiding and weaving of funding to help support the initiative. That's something that we learned. We are so that way. That would also help guide your work and your initiative. Our initiative is not state or federally funded, so we're continuously having to fundraise. So always thinking about how we can braid and weave funding to make things happen. Also promoting practices that will result in a change in city and state level. So you're talking about systems changes. What priorities can you embed within your program and your initiative that can eventually change systems across your city and across your state? I think that's another big piece. One thing I think we did not mention is the fact of investing in a formative evaluation and technical assistance and be part of a learning community network. I think that was something that helped guide us and was really critical and crucial within our initiative. And we can talk a little bit more about that. But I would say evaluations and technical assistance is also key. Another thing, Marjorie, before I wrap up, I would say that with us, we had our executive leadership and also our board play a critical role. So I would say get the buy-in from them. They are big advocates for our dual generation initiative. And then with that, they also were able to invest in our work. So I would say for me, that would be my advice as far as implementing a 2-gen approach.
Thank you. And that's really helpful. And I do want to come back to the question around evaluation and technical assistance, but first want to go a little bit deeper into the voices of families. Lakeisha, you said that you started there. Shannon, that's important to your work. We've gotten a number of questions in the Q&A about building social capital. And I see these two things very connected, right? How do you engage families, but also help them connect with each other so that they're building community? One of the things that Ascend has found over the years, we do every 2 years focus groups across the country with parents to understand how they're navigating public systems, what their recommendations are, how they're feeling about their community. And we find that they're really isolated. Families in communities that have been marginalized often do not trust their neighbor to watch their kids, right? So how have you all thought about building social capital with and among your families so that they can, bridge and navigate formal and informal systems for themselves? I put in the Q&A some links to some resources from the Department of Health and Human Services. The Assistant Secretary of Planning and Evaluation did, a 2-year-long study on social capital and developed some resources. So I'll put that in the chat as well. But Lakeisha, let's start with you around social capital, insights, learning strategies, and then go to Shannon. Thank you.
Good question, I think, or good questions around social capital, because I really truly feel that people don't realize how important and critical building social capital amongst the community and the members as part of your program is. I would say what we did was with our parent advisory committee, we started there. We really uplifted there. Our parent advisory committee uses that time together. They're meeting on a monthly basis. And throughout that time, they're using that time to build a peer support for each other. And then also when we're in the community, they're in the community with us. So they're talking about motivating families to take part in programs, motivating families to want to be part of programs to increase their education, to work on parenting, building parenting supports, building parenting tools. So I would say that is a big piece for us, our parent advisory committee. We also use our parent advisory committee to be part of having conversations with our partners at our partner table. So we have staff retreats where our parent advisory committee plays a big facilitation role. So there are panels as part of that process. They facilitate breakout groups to talk about community needs, to be the voice of parents that are not there. So I will say our parent advisory committee is real big on peer support and building social capital, not only amongst themselves, but they're in the community doing it as well.
Beautiful, thank you. Shannon, what would you like to add to this part of the conversation?
Yeah, again, Lakeisha, I'm gonna ditto what you just said. But Sierra, if you don't mind, would you mind sharing maybe the slide that says advancing equity and includes our parent advisory council? So as you're doing that, I'll say that I think one of the differences between United Way of Central Indiana and United Way of San Antonio is we don't have necessarily one single initiative that we're focusing on, but we are applying the two-generation approach throughout a number of different issue areas, again, such as early care and learning and safe and affordable housing. If you could move to the next, I think it's 2 slides over, please. One more. Thank you so much. And so we, again, like many of you, our primary function within the 2Gen space has been serving as a funder and a community investor in the work. That being said, we have, coming back to the principles that Marjorie shared earlier, part of our refining and scaling and sustaining and self-evaluation of our work is always measuring ourselves against these principles. And we found ourselves in 2021 saying, we are investing in organizations who are elevating parent and community voice as part of their, the way in which they implement programs, the way in which they refine their programs. We were incentivizing through increased dollars to those grantee partners to be doing that work because we felt that it was deeply important. And that we're still doing that. But then we also thought to ourselves through some of this reflection and evolution that there was an opportunity and very frankly, a responsibility for us to be doing the same in a way that positions United Way of Central Indiana without tokenizing voices in our community. And so in 2021, late 2021, we relied on a number of United Ways and other organizations who had already launched a parent advisory council. Because we knew that we really had an increased responsibility to create a space where we could bring together residents who not only came together for us in a council format, but who also then served as primary advisors to a fund, to a pool of dollars. And so in 2022, we launched our Parent Advisory Council very specifically to respond to and ensure that we were deliberately, and again, intentionally engaging and listening to the voices of families. And so we currently have a council of 17 members who represent 10 different zip codes. We bring parent empowerment training to the space, but essentially it's a space for those members to connect with one another, build on what we call the special sauce or the social capital. It's an opportunity for those members to bring their lived experience and advocate for their neighbors and their communities at the table. And so we serve as a fiscal agent in the background, if you will, ensuring that there's space for them to meet, ensuring that there's childcare provided, ensuring that we provide transportation supports if needed and provide a meal. But we say at the start of each cohort, we just started a second cohort. The members have $200,000 in the first year and now $300,000 because our organization has made a commitment and has really seen the power in what happens when we step out and allow members of our council to step in and serve as the primary advisors of the fund. So they go through a process in, kind of unpacking and understanding what are the current community needs, what are our members experiencing, what are they seeing, what are they feeling, and then how do they come together as a group to make some decisions around how to invest, in this case, $300,000. So it's a way for us to also, ensure that kind of checking, I guess you will, checking ourselves, checking our investments, that what we are doing is informed by and supported by and what's the word I'm looking for? That we sometimes, and I think in the United Way space, we're such large institutions, it can be easy to be closed off and not hear, the community voice around us. And so for us, it's a very deliberate and intentional way to ensure that we are doing just that we are bringing in those voices. So, Engagement has gone beyond the Parent Advisory Council. We have a few members that sit on our impact fund grant making committees, which total $20 million annually. They vote, they review applications, they influence the decision making that's happening in those at those seats. And again, they serve as community investors, we don't inform what the focus areas are or who they are going to be investing into. They do all of that. So that's really, we're still learning. I will say we're still learning. We're working through some logistics. But it's to the point of always just refining, I guess. So always refining with the sole purpose of advancing equity and pulling forward parent and community voice in our work.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. Thank you, Shannon. And that makes me want to now go back to, a little more conversation around evaluation and technical assistance, right? I'm really curious about who you partner with around evaluation, technical assistance, and what might you be learning from that? And same for you, Lakeisha, but let's start with Shannon.
I'm sorry, I went off mute too soon. Sarah, if you could please just keep my slides up, and if you don't mind advancing to the slide that says measuring progress, I think that might be most helpful. So I'll start out by saying, to answer your question, Marjorie, I keep coming back to something that I hear you and Anne say often, is that relationships move at the speed of trust. And that really matters when we talk about measurement and evaluation, particularly with our partners. So within the 2GEN outcomes that we are collectively working towards as a community, data collection and reporting is a part of it. We need to be able to speak to United Way Worldwide. We need to be able to speak to our donors. We need to be able to hopefully get more people on this momentum to move forward and understand the power of 2-generation work. And so for us at our local United Way, we do that in a few different ways. The first one is we have what we call an interactive data dashboard, where we are pairing community need with impact data. So for us, it serves as, a pretty simple, like, here's the problem, and here's where we have an opportunity to help fill that gap. And that is United Way's impact data, but that's also some data of other intermediaries who are also working in this space. So that's a transparent opportunity for our stakeholders to go to our website and learn about, what's happening, what's the current landscape. And with that, we use that data to then drive our strategies and our measurement. And I'll get to that here in just a moment. And then we communicate back to our partners, because we all know that we are asked by funders, and we as funders also ask for a lot of information. And so sharing back with our partners on, what are we doing with this information? How might it be helpful and informative to you as a service level provider, but really also as a network of providers who are serving families? And so again, we have a number of different tools. We have our interactive data dashboards. And then if you could move to the next slide. I would be remiss if I didn't also lift up. We are in the middle of learning all about Power BI for our local United Way, but this is how we share outputs and outcomes with our partner organizations within the 2GEN space. So I realize it is hard to see here, but kind of on the left side of the left box, those are the different focus areas of the 2-generation approach. There are 6,500 families who are being served through about 40 different partners who are receiving 2-generation funding. And then on the right side of the screen, we also elevate, what are the current outcomes? Outputs. How many families are being served by these different focus areas or issue areas, where if you squint your eyes, you might be able to see those issue areas captured on the right side. So again, it's capturing the information at the programmatic or at the investment level for our 40-ish partners who are involved in this 2-generation whole family work. But then I think the key thing is communicating back to those partners. And then on the last slide, I always say the caveat to this is that if there are any engineers or any individuals that have an engineering background here, you may look at this slide and go, oh yes, I know what this is. But for most of us, like myself, the first time I saw this next slide, or the slide that's coming, I wasn't quite sure what this meant, but I'll do my best to capture it for you. So for us at United Way, we recently started, actually, it's been a long time. It's been a journey. It's been about 2 years of working with the state of Indiana to work with our Indiana Department of Workforce Development and our Indiana Department of Education and the Indiana Commission on Higher Education to essentially leverage what they call a data warehouse. And that's what you see here in front of you here, to input family ID or family and individual information, where the output then becomes aggregate data that tells us what's working essentially at the CBO level. So what combination of services or what workforce development combined with access to an early childhood education program, what's working, where can we build on these things? So this is still relatively new for us. Again, it looks like an engineer put this together, but it's really an effort for us to measure and account for outcomes for both children and adults, which again is the #1 principle that Ascend has put out. And so it is a process. It can be hard to follow, but really simply put, for us, it's tracking individual client outcomes, and we will be able to see this long term. So we'll be able to see in 5 years the outcomes of this work. And then most importantly, I would say the data goes back to our community-based organization partners so that they also then can see what's working. And ideally, you know, we've had a few partners say that they're already pulling forward some of the preliminary results into some funding applications for them to pursue additional funding to elevate the impact of their work. So we're thinking of it in a number of different ways, Marjorie. I hope that's helpful. But you know, it's looking at the outputs and the outcomes, but then big picture, how are we moving families towards economic prosperity?
Yeah, love this. Thank you so much. Really impressive. Lakeisha, what would you like to add around evaluation and technical assistance?
So I would just add just what Shannon just shared as far as a data dashboard. We have that as well here at our United Way. And what we do with our data dashboard is we're continuously playing that data back to our partners at a leadership level as well as a frontline staff level. So on a monthly basis, we're meeting with our partners to have these ongoing conversations around our data, playing it back and just continuing to be like really intentional about what it means and what it looks like to really serve whole families. I will also add that from the beginning of our initiative in 2013, with working with the Annie Casey Foundation, we have always participated in formative evaluations with the Aspen Institute as well as the TCC group, which was evaluating the Annie E. Casey Foundation as a strategic co-investor. And just as recently last month, just wrapped up a 3-year rapid cycle learning formative evaluation and measuring development with the OPRE, with the next steps for rigorous research for 2-generation approaches around our 2-generation work. So with that process, we were able to get tools from NS2G around our initiative and ways to strengthen our approach in serving our community. They did focus groups with our partners to be able to play that information back to us. And then also we were able to develop a logic model to also assist in informing and doing our work. So I would say evaluation is a big piece and plays a big role across our our initiative, and then also just continuously being part of learning communities. We're funded by the Doris Duke Foundation. So we participate in the Pop Change learning community. So anytime you want to know information about like lessons learned and what are other communities doing, I would say being part of these learning community networks is a big piece for us as well.
Yeah, thank you, Lakeisha. And if you would you mind putting a link into the chat for the Pop Change work that you did? I put a link in the chat to the Office of Planning, Research and Evaluation at the Administration for Children and Families, their specific work that they did to deepen two-generation learning and evaluation. I think it's some of the most sophisticated work, you know, at the national level around two-generation learning and evaluation, and they've developed, as Lakeisha shared, a number of tools and resources for practitioners that are taking two-generation approaches. So thank you for sharing all of that. We're almost coming towards the end of our time together, and we've covered a lot of ground. So thank you, Shannon and Lakeisha. We talked about, you know, how do you support, you know, peer United Ways in their work, learning and evaluation. You talked a little bit about your funding structures and the importance of blending and braiding resources to support this work. You really centered on the voices of families and building social capital. So as we close out, I just want to know from you, what is your vision for your two-gen work going forward? That's a little bit one that we didn't have planned for, but we covered a lot of ground, and would love to know where you're headed and how people can stay in touch with the two of you. Lakeisha, actually, the folks from Philadelphia really want to be in touch with you about your work. So, but please, what's on the horizon for you, and how can people stay in touch? Lakeisha, you want to start?
Oh, I can. So I would say just continuing to do the work. From the beginning, our initiative has not swayed away from continuing to keep our families at the center of our work. So I would say when we're talking about what we're continuing to do, I would say being family centered and making sure we keep that approach moving forward, and continuing to build on our collaboration as new processes come in, new program availability, just listening to what our community is saying, listening to what our families are saying, and just making sure that we're continuously bringing those programs and services to the forefront. I will like to add that I didn't share that 94% of our families within our initiative are families of color, right? So that's one thing that we noticed, and we did just recently, as of the beginning of this year, March, and then implemented in July, 2 culturally relevant child abuse prevention programs. So when we're talking about listening and being intentional about equity and race, you know, diversity and inclusion, like making sure that we're being really intentional. So when I say that the best way to sum up what we do is we not only talk the talk, but we make sure that we walk the walk as well. We listen, we actively listen to what it is that families are asking for, and just making sure that we're providing them with the tools and resources that they need. And how you can get in touch with me, Lakeisha Bragg. My email is, and I think Marjorie, are you sharing all of our information?
It will be shared, yes.
Okay, so really interested in hearing from individuals that are interested in a two-generation approach, or if you're already implementing a two-generation approach, if you want to know more information about uplifting parent voice, in, you know, incorporating social capital into your work, I am available. So you'll have my contact information, and you can reach out to me.
Thank you,
Marjorie.
Lakeisha. Thank you. Shannon, you're closing us out with a minute. So
would-
thank you.
I really would say ditto to so much of what Lakeisha said. I will say we as an organization have committed to doubling down. So we are currently having served about 6,000 families through our partners, and we just recently committed to distancing or moving 10,000 households out of poverty here in central Indiana. And so we know that that takes more partners. It takes a commitment to sustaining the investment. It takes continuous learning. And so I am more than open and always love speaking with other United Ways, organizations who are not United Ways, and how they're thinking about this work, because I think there's just so much power and opportunity in learning and sharing within this space. It is not easy work, and it's long-term work. And so it's just an honor to be here this afternoon, and I would love to connect with others after today. And I'll just say, it's an honor to be part of a movement of people who are, and organizations who are committed to serving families.
Thank you so much, Shannon and Lakeisha. I say every day, I am so honored because I get to work with the Coalition of the Willing, the people that know these systems need to change on behalf of families, and you're already doing that work. And it's an honor for us to be able to partner with you, United Way Worldwide, and campaign for grade level reading. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Bonnie, and thank you.
Well, thank you, ladies. Thank you so much. On behalf of the campaign, I just want to say thank you for really sharing with folks sort of how to create an intergenerational path to opportunity. And I think that is so much of what your work is and what we're all trying to do. I want to just remind folks that there are upcoming learning opportunities that are happening, and Sierra talked about these in the beginning, but I want you to just kind of keep those in mind and with your calendar. Some great conversations are coming up, and I'm also going to do a little plug for part 3 of this conversation. We've had part 2 of it today. We had the first conversation in July, and really the United Way, the campaign for grade level reading, and Ascend came together because we realized that we are aligned around what our vision is for young people and for children. And I think we also deeply appreciate the importance of parents as co-producers of good outcomes for kids. And so this 2-generation conversation makes great sense for us. And we're going to be planning part 3 of this towards the end of November. So stay tuned and you'll hear more about that in the days to come. So once again, thanks to everybody for being with us today. We look forward to finding you on another Learning Tuesday. So enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.